giving you useful and practical tips to help you make more money selling travel. This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast, and here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
Okay, you guys, I have a fabulous episode ahead for you today. I've invited Ming Tappin, your cruise coach, to join me to talk about what it's like to cruise in a post-pandemic sort of a world. So thanks so much for coming and joining us today, Ming.
Thanks, Glenda. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for asking me. I feel so flattered.
Well, I've been watching you online, and oh my goodness, your adventures have been amazing. You've just come off of the Virgin, was it the Scarlet Lady you were on?
Yes, I was on the Scarlet Lady just a couple of weeks ago.
That's amazing, amazing. So one of the reasons why I reached out to you is because while I love to cruise, and over the years I've sold hundreds of passengers on cruises, heck, I've taken hundreds of passengers with me in groups. I honestly don't know what it looks like to cruise in this new era. What and you know, all the things that we've always kind of taken for granted and the things that we've experienced along the way and things like that you never really thought twice of. It kind of makes me start to think about it a little bit differently. And so I thought the best way to do it is just talk to somebody who's actually been cruising since. And you've done more than just the one cruise, right?
Yes, I actually did two. I've done two. I was on Silver Sea in December. I went from in the Caribbean, and I went to the Panama Canal, and then I did the Virgin cruise, just early February, and that was a 5-night in the Caribbean.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to chat a little bit about what Virgin's all about, just because I'm really curious about that. But what would you say is kind of some of the biggest differences in the ways that cruise lines are working to make sure that we're all safe and that cruising can be safe?
Yeah, I mean, after the pandemic hit and all the cruise ships stopped sailing, and for about, I think we got to 18 months before they started coming back, they just didn't sit idle. They were right away trying to figure out how do we return back to sea, and what are some of the things we need to put in place to make sure our guests and our crew and the people that we're visiting at ports are going to remain safe. We're not out of COVID yet, so I don't like to say post-COVID, but at least we're now back to at sea during COVID. So that was their number one priority of how are they going to make sure guests are back and they can cruise safely, because as we all know that the industry suffered a great deal through the pandemic because of the incidents that occurred before anyone knew what to do, and we had all of those outbreaks and horror stories, unfortunately. So they definitely didn't just sit on their butts and just waiting for things to happen. They went and one of the things they did with all the ships is they refitted everything with fresh air exchange. You're no longer, I think the average time is like 10 to 15 minutes before the entire air system inside the ship is filtered through and you're fresh again. So you're not like in an airplane or, when you're sitting breathing recycled air all the time, because everyone was very concerned about the virus being passed on through respiration. So all of that got changed out, and they did a lot of changes on board the ship to make sure the health and sanitation protocols are even more stringent than before. Like you said, you've been on lots of cruises before. Remember, they were always already, mopping and wiping down the railings and everything like that. Now they did even more of that. They tripled the effort. So along with a whole bunch of different things. So we can go into specifics if you want to address, because I totally saw that on the last two cruises.
I love that, because I don't like to consider myself a germaphobe, but then I have other moments where I think about things and then I realize I could be. My germs are okay, but I'm not cool with others.
Yeah, and on board the ship now, they are, I think they've always been germaphobes on the ships, right? Because before COVID, there was, and I mean there still is, norovirus, which is easily passed by, like intestinal whatchamacallit, infections. So the hygiene, the hand hygiene and hygiene overall had always been already a priority. And now with COVID, there's now even more, and they're enforced now. Before there would be, a little sanitizer thing that you would, zap your hands before you. Now they make sure they watch you do it. They watch you wash your hands. They wipe everything down in between the changes of the tables and things like that. And they're wiping down pretty well like every 10 minutes. They're wiping down the elevator buttons, the railings, like they're doing so much more to address that passing of germs. And of course, wearing masks on board the ships. Now, this is dependent on cruise lines because you need to be double vaccinated to go on board the ship now. And some of the cruise lines are also, for example, Silver Sea has also required that you are boosted before you can actually sail. And so this is a requirement of all of their guests and all of their crew. So with people coming on double vaccinated, some of the cruise lines have relaxed their mask wearing rule, but others have not. And me as a germaphobe like you, I would always wear my mask, even when they say you don't have to wear a mask. Even if I'm going on a cruise now that doesn't require to wear a mask, I would still wear a mask, just like I would here in our town when they lifted the mask restrictions. We still wore our masks whenever we went anywhere. So there's a lot of things you can do, obviously, on the ship to mitigate that risk.
That's great. So now, of course, you do have some that are wearing masks, some that are not. And of course, depending on when people are listening to this particular episode, the rules may have changed this morning and change again tonight. So, but I also have these moments where there's so much about cruising that was about the people interaction. I remember our first big family cruise that we did. We went on, oh goodness, it was the Allure of the Seas. We took the kids and it was a multi-generation. I think there were 16 or 17 of us on there. And I will never forget coming out of our room and the cabin steward going, no, mama, the boys went that way. Because my kids had a room next to, or one or two down from us. And I guess they had just come out and we went to go right. And he's like, no, they went that way. So we ended up going left. Yeah. And that's what I love about cruising, is this level of service and things like that. Would you say there's still that personal touch to it? Or are they more busy with the other parts of what needs to be done?
No, the personal touch is definitely still there. And keeping in mind too, now that the ships are not back at full 100% capacity. The ships that are in the waters now are all booking between 50 and maybe 70%, but sometimes even lower. On my Virgin cruise, the ship's capacity, normal capacity is 2,700 people. There were 600 of us on that sailing. So,
oh, wow.
And on Silver Sea, the ship's capacity was about 594, and we had just over 300.
Oh, wow.
So we're looking at a low capacity. But the nice thing is it's 100% full staff. So they're not lowering the number of staff because the ships aren't as full. It's 100% full staff. So your service levels, and as you know, before COVID, service levels have already been so great, where they look after you so well. And now with a smaller number of guests on the ship, the service is even better because now there are less guests on board with the same amount of crew. And the crew is so genuinely happy to be back on ships, to be working again, to be interacting, just like the guests are so happy to get back on the ship to see the world again. So the service levels I found have definitely been, I mean, not that they needed to be improved, but they're even better now than on the last two cruises. Just also too, I think everybody's just so happy to be back. Everyone's very social, lively, and we're all wearing masks, and there's no worry about, it wasn't like the staff wasn't talking to you because they were afraid to interact because they're afraid to pass on or catch COVID. It was everybody's masked up, everybody's double vaccinated, and everybody's also tested before they came on the cruise. The same scenario for Virgin and Silver Sea. We all had to have a negative antigen test before we're allowed to board. So with that level of security, the interaction is 100% the way nothing has changed. Like I said, even better because of the low number of guests on the ship.
So now cruise lines for years have been known for buffets. What does that look like?
Well, depending on the cruise line you go on, the ships that have buffets still have them, except you don't serve yourself anymore. So you walk into the buffet and there's all the food stations. You go and have a look, and depending on the ship, some of them you can get your tray and your cutlery like you normally did after washing your hands, and they want you to do that. And you can point to what you want, and the servers behind the buffet stations will put it on your plate. They'll scoop it and put it on your plate, or they take the plate or whatever it is, if it's already plated, put it on your tray. So that is all done for you. The other option that I saw on the Silver Sea is you go up there and you look at what you want, you go back to your table where you're sitting in the buffet, and you order it from the waiter.
Okay.
And the waiter brings it to you. Like, for example, at breakfast, there's an omelet station where you can go and say, I want this and this on my omelet. And then you stand there and you wait for it. You don't do that anymore. You tell your waiter, I want this and this in my omelet. He goes and orders it and brings it to you to your table.
Okay. I love that, because I tell you the amount of times I would stand there waiting for that omelet, and I'm like, this had better taste really good because I've been standing here for 25 minutes.
Yeah. And you're standing in the buffet where the way it used to be, and there's a person in front of you and they're like, I don't know if I want this. I don't know if I want that. And they take 5 minutes and then you're standing there. And once I actually, like one time, a long time ago, there was a guy in front of me at the buffet doing exactly that. So I decided to move ahead of him, and he yelled at me like, don't butt in line or whatever. I'm like, well, you're standing there taking forever. So that eliminates the new buffet, or the new style eliminates that. There's no more, people taking up forever, and or the waste, right? People just dumping all the stuff on their plate and then not eating it. This way you're giving a good portion by the server. The one thing I wanted to point out on Virgin is that when they brought out the cruise line and the ships, they purposely decided not to have a buffet because Virgin's different. There's a lot of different things about them. They're very different and innovative in the industry, and they didn't want a buffet in the casual dining area. So what they did was they have all these different food stations. It's kind of like going to a food court. It's actually exactly like going to a food court, where there's Mexican, and then the next section is, Italian, and there's sandwiches, there's salad, there's tacos, there's paninis, and all different food stations. You again can go and look at them all, or there's menus that you can now, again, that's another thing too, is a lot of QR codes are now being used for those who have a smartphone who don't want to touch paper, just like you do a lot of restaurants at home, right? Are now doing that. QR codes as our paper menus, although paper menus do still exist. You can go sit at your table and chair, look at the QR code, look at all the things you want, and then you order what you like, and the waiter goes to that food station and collects the food and brings it to you. So that's Virgin's take on the buffet. And this was designed to be that way with or without COVID. This is the way they were coming out. That's even awesome. Without COVID in question. So this was the way they always were going to do it. They weren't going to have a buffet, but food court style station. And the service, again, was excellent because the minute you ordered, shortly after that, your food came very, very quick and efficient.
Absolutely. So now when we're thinking of excursions, and of course you've experienced it on Virgin, which we all know is going to be a different cruise line than the average and that sort of thing. But what are you hearing, or what have you experienced when it comes to excursions? Are they still lining up hundreds of people on the piers to all get on giant buses at the same time?
Excursions have definitely changed from what I've seen, from what I've known. So first of all, one very important thing that travel advisors need to know, again, for safety, is that the cruise lines will only work with tour operators, and they'll always only go to those ports to begin with that can adhere to the COVID protocols that the CDC has put forth, that the cruise lines are following. So they demand that their excursion staff or tour operators that they work with have all been vaccinated, and they also are tested, and they follow the hand sanitizing, mask wearing, social distancing rules. Yes, there are still buses as you would need to get from point A to point B for your excursion, but you're seeing social distancing. So every other row is empty with, they're marked out as please don't sit here kind of thing. And when you're inside the coach, the driver, the tour guide, and all the guests are wearing masks. And they hands every time you get off, say you get to your excursion, you get off and you do whatever, you come back on the bus, they're spraying your hands with hand sanitizer. So a lot of that is now brought ashore so that the guests can be in that bubble, that they're with the group of people who are tested and vaccinated. And what was the other thing I was going to say? The excursions are basically the same. I didn't see in terms of selection, I didn't see any smaller or limited selection because of COVID. Again, because they're working with those tour operators and they're very stringent with that protocols, that they're still able to offer. I mean, on my Silver Sea cruise, there were lots and lots of options, 10, 12 tours at a specific port for guests to select from. And there's only a few, and I can't think of off the top of my head or heard of anyone mentioned that there are some ports that you may not be able to venture off on your own. If a specific island or port or a country is still having very strict protocols on who can come and go, some of those countries may insist that if you want to see the country, you have to take an excursion from the ship, as opposed to being able to wander off. Because there are a lot of other countries now in the Caribbean and in ports on the islands that you can wander off because they know you have been double vaccinated to be on this cruise, you were tested. So there is that kind of safety bubble that they are allowing guests to go on their own. But some places you may have to purchase an excursion in order to see the port.
Okay, great. Because that was actually going to be my next question, was whether or not you're able just to go on your own. But that makes sense. So those decisions as to whether or not that's allowed, that's made at the destination's level, at the country that you're visiting's level.
Exactly. It's not the cruise line's decision. It is the country that the cruise line is visiting. And of course, again, fluid changes. It could be okay now, but may not be later, depending on what's happening in the COVID world. So, but generally, you are able to know that in advance before you go, unless something drastic happened and they made a change during the cruise. I know I had family who went on a cruise in early January, and their itinerary was changed the week of because one of the islands they were going to decided to change the rules, right? So it's still fluid. So we are kind of still, we have to be mindful that this could happen. Your itinerary may be affected.
Absolutely. And I think that's something really important for travel advisors to relay to their clients, is that nothing is set in stone. When it comes to cruising, nothing's set in stone to begin with. But in particular, it's kind of a roll with the punches factor right now. The only thing that's guaranteed is once you pass all your tests and that sort of thing, that you can get on the ship. But as to where the ship can stop, that could change just depending.
Yeah, and it's not like it changes all the time, but just be aware that it could change. And it may not be your entire itinerary. It could just be one port out of your whole cruise. But I think as we're seeing the peak of Omicron gone by now and things are starting to get better, I think we're going to see more stability. I'm seeing every day more and more islands are now lifting their restrictions on what they require travelers in order to enter. A lot of them are doing away with the tests and things like that. So I'm seeing that as we go forward, I think that uncertainty of itinerary changing is going to be less and less.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think this is all great information. Before I let you go, I do want to ask what I saw your pictures and other such of Virgin as you went and things like that. I would love to kind of get a bit of a feel for those travel advisors who have not yet had an opportunity to sail Virgin, but are considering selling it for their clients. What are a couple of highlights, or what are a couple things that you would mention, or things that travel advisors need to know about that, just because it is such a new style of cruising? It's definitely not grandma's casino cruise.
And I like to say, unless your grandma has pink hair and has tattoos.
Well, a lot of them do.
Yeah, and some of them do. I'm not saying, yeah. I know it's funny when we think, when I came on board, I already knew a little bit about the brand before I went. I did their Sea Academy training, which, by the way, travel advisors can start there. They have Virgin Voyages has a website called firstmates.com, and I'm doing promotion for them. But anyways, I don't mind. Firstmates is what they call their travel advisors. So it's kind of, they have these cute names. That's the first thing that's a little different about Virgin. They have their little cute, cheeky names, right? So when you're not a guest on board Virgin, you're a sailor. You're not a travel advisor, you're a first mate. So anyways, at firstmates.com, there is a training program called Sea Academy, and it's a great start for you to learn all about Virgin. So I encourage advisors to go have a look at that. But I definitely know from my training and reading about the ship before I went on board is that they were geared towards adults only. So 18 plus, no kids on the ship or nobody younger than 18. And they were going after the millennial market. And when I came on board, I totally saw that. Millennials love, I mean, most of us now have our phones glued to our hands all the time. So everything's done through the app, right? Like, what time is the show? When's my massage? Did I book a class at the gym? Everything is on their agenda, what's happening during the day, stuff about the ship, where can I eat? Everything's on the app. So it's very much, again, towards that generation where we're always looking at our phones, right? And on the ship, there's all of these Instagrammable moments where there's places to sit on a swing with a phrase behind your head, and you can take a photo and post it. And there's a lot of photo ops areas. And also in the decor of the ship, there's a lot of big sunbeds and loungers and great gathering spaces, which, you know, millennials love to do. They get their groups together and they have fun and they hang out, right? And chill and relax. So, and I'm totally not a millennial, so I probably am not saying all these cool phrases.
So
but
long
anyway.
as you identify as one, you're all good.
Yes. So I could see that this market coming on board, and the age on the ship was mid-20s, 30s, 20s, 30s to 40s, that age group. And they're very social. The ship is created to be a social environment. Lots of music in the background. Sometimes you feel like you're in a nightclub, but not in an annoying way. Like there's always music going on. There's mood lighting around. It feels fun. You definitely came on board the ship knowing that you're going to have a great time. And again, back to my point, you can be any age to cruise as long as you have a young at heart frame of mind, open to different things. One of the things I mentioned, they did it with the buffet. So all the eateries upstairs in the buffet area would be food court type of full service design. But all the dining venues are complimentary. So unlike other cruise lines where you have your main restaurant and your buffet and everything else you got to pay for, like the steakhouse or the Mexican or they even have a Korean barbecue on the ship, which is again something new that's never been tried on board a ship. Because if you've been to a Korean barbecue, there's that huge central exhaust thing that sucks up all the smoke, right, when they barbecue all your meat. So that's a huge thing they have to put on a ship. And that restaurant has all these stations where you can sit and have your little Korean barbecue. So that's different. And so all the dining venues are included. You don't have to pay extra for, which is fantastic. The entertainment was very, very different. If you've been on any cruise ship and watched the shows where it's like Broadway style or singers and dancers, this is completely different. They have an energetic troupe of dancers that make you feel like you're watching a modern dance performance. There's a bit of a storyline behind it, but it's so offbeat, and the audio visuals are fantastic. The dancers are energetic, and there's acrobatic components, but again, there's nothing like you've seen on a cruise ship show. Every single show I went to floored me, and there's some risque elements. There's guy in drag, and there's a lady who could be on stage talking about sex and using language that people may not used to be hearing, right? And so on and fun, but that's something that I found a little bit different. So if you came on as an experienced cruiser from another brands where it's more what you remember, what you know, sometimes if you're not prepared for it, you may be completely shocked. It's like, oh, I had no idea this is going to be like this. I mean, even as much as I prepared myself, when I went on board, I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is so different. So it's refreshing. And I think he's going to do well with that market.
I think so too. One quick question before I ask the next one. When people hear 18 plus, it invokes some fears in some as well as to, okay, is it just that there's no kids, or are we leaning towards Hedo? Is it just more the no kids and an energetic lounge factor, or is there any degree of riskiness anywheres there?
No, it's 18 plus, as in, yeah, there's no kids around, so you're not going to get, kids in your hair or anywhere on the ship. But it's not like you don't go on the ship and get stupid drunk and party all night long and hook up and all that stuff. So it's not that at all. It's still very classy. But obviously that demographic of the millennials is a social group to begin with. So you're going to see more people having fun together and enjoying themselves and gathering in groups, but it's not like they will overrun or take over or ruin your experience. And certainly I didn't see any when I was on the ship. I didn't see anybody like falling over drunk and spilling the drink, like that kind of stuff. You would, like you mentioned, the Hedo kind of aspect. It was still very classy from what I saw. So it's not going to be like that.
That's awesome.
You definitely want to go on wanting to have a social time and a fun, active time. If a couple goes, the couple should be ready to go and do a lot of things on board and be active. Whereas, if your partner is more of a quiet type of person, then he or she will need to be aware that, okay, maybe it's going to be more active than normal. It's the perfect cruise, I would say, for a bunch of girlfriends or a bunch of boyfriends to go away kind of thing, because then you can go dance, you can go do different things. The fitness program, of course, I have to mention that too, is phenomenal. Again, all fitness classes are included.
Wow.
So, and it's not just morning stretch and afternoon abs. I mean, there's bungee class, I did bar, there's spin, there's Pilates, yoga, meditation, like really different things that are more than just your standard cruise gym class, right? Because I go to the gym quite a lot when I'm on cruises, and that's one of the things I noticed on the regular mainstream cruise lines is now they're doing more and more. You got to pay for Pilates, pay for yoga, pay for spin, pay for everything besides just the morning stretch and the afternoon abs. And they've done away with a lot of the cardio fitness, but on Virgin they brought it back. I mean, the whole area is spread over 3 decks, and there's so many different classes that you can do. So it's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that anybody that's been around me for any length of time, that I talk about understanding your audience, knowing who your audience is and other such. And true to Virgin, knowing who their audience is, I also noticed that the majority of their sailings are very short. They have very few sailings that extend past a week, but that age demographic doesn't really get away for longer than that. And so that kind of factors into it. And I really love that they know their audience so well, and they're truly leaning into that. And also too, I think part of that is getting away from the nickel and diming. And, if you haven't sold a lot of cruises before, or, it's been a while, it's not always about the first sticker price. It is about, what is it going to cost you to get off the ship? It's not just what it costs you to get on, but what's it going to cost you to get off? And so understanding, no matter what the cruise line is, but knowing what are those added values, what are those things that are going to get included? Because if you can go rock out in some fabulous classes, why wouldn't you? Whereas other ones, I've been on other cruise lines where it's an extra $20 for this, an extra $30 for that, an extra, and with some cruise lines, it costs more to get off the ship than it did to get on the ship. And so it's not about the first price, it's about the total price.
Exactly. And that's the great analogy that you use of what does it cost for you to get on the ship and then get off the ship? Because you can get on a cruise for $3.99. I've seen lots of that pre-pandemic. But you might get off the ship with a $1,200 bill or $2,000 bill, depending on how crazy you get when you're on board, right? Because yes, everything is, and that's one of the biggest coming from all-inclusive, right? Because all-inclusive land resort is like everything's included. I pay $7.99, get everything.
Yeah.
On a cruise, I pay $7.99, I got to pay for extra actually. So cruise lines are addressing that, like Virgin, by including a lot of the basic things that are in there, right? And then giving you options to purchase as you go, because not everybody wants to have an all-inclusive drink package. Not everybody wants to have all the specialty dining included. So there are some options that are pay as you go, but if you want, you can purchase a drink package for those who really want it. Or there's putting in a lot of these perks as part of the cruise promotions or building it into the price. So now that there's a lot more added value, so yes, you pay a little bit more up front, but you're paying it in Canadian dollars. It's done deal, and then you pay little or none when you get off the ship. And for example, on the Silver Sea cruise, where everything is included, and now they're also including excursions in their fare. So you can literally come off, if you're really frugal and thrifty and don't go a step over what you paid, you can get off the ship with $0.
And still have had a good vacation. I think that's kind of the differentiator too. But from the travel advisor perspective, these are things your clients are going to spend their money on. So why not get your commission on it? Because when it's a part of these promotions and when it's a part of these value added packages and bundles and things like that, those bundles become commissionable.
Exactly. And if the client decides to buy that drink package once they're on board, or buy an excursion once they're on board, you don't get commission off that, except once they buy on board, you don't get it. But if they pre-book, you may get commission on that, right? But don't wait till they get on board and then, oh yeah, I should have bought the drink package, so I'm buying it now. And then you didn't see the commission because you should have sold it with the package or sold it as included.
And I think right now too, especially as cruise lines are gearing up, while cruises are selling very hot right now, cruise lines are still putting out promotions. So definitely get your clients those best promotions that are out there, which are going to be those more value adds where more things are included. Again, going to increase your commission, but also to your clients, if they haven't gone back to cruising or possibly have never cruised, this is a very overwhelming time period for them. So take that opportunity to take care of as many pieces of that puzzle as you can. And it's going to create a better experience. Now, one thing, just touching back to Virgin real quick, just because apparently every travel advisor I know has been on Virgin lately. So I've been watching all their stories on Instagram and things like that. I saw one travel advisor, she was talking about, because it was leading up to Super Bowl, there is no TVs, there's no sports games in the lounges on Virgin because they want you to be interacting and having conversation. Because she was saying, Virgin, you're going to have to fix this because now I'm trapped in my room because my husband doesn't want to go for supper yet because he doesn't want to miss any part of the game. So that's something, those are where there is those little quirks and other such that they do it so different that it is something just to be mindful of. One question I wanted to ask, because everything runs on the app and this and the other, what's the internet like on Virgin?
It was actually good. I can't say the same about their app. Their app needs to be worked out. I'll go on the internet in a second, but the app, unfortunately, I think that was probably one of the downfalls on the experience. And it's just not me. I mean, I talk to people on the ship who are millennials, and millennials are way more tech savvy, and they're always doing everything on their phone, right? And they're saying, the app was a little atrocious at times. It kept crashing, it kept freezing, sometimes it didn't load. And before you go on the ship from your home, you're supposed to download the app and do everything on there. You can book your dining, you can look at what's happening during the day and book your excursions, right? Before you get to the ship, and upload all your passenger information. But that was quirky and it didn't always work. And when we're on the ship, it also didn't always work. Some of the things I booked didn't show up on my agenda, even though I talked to Sailor Services, which is their guest relations. They said, oh yeah, I have you booked for this and this and this, but it doesn't show up on my app. So the app, and they acknowledge that they're working on it. But I think for a brand that came out, launched for the millennials, I think they should have had this down pat at launch time and not like, oh, we're still working on it. But the internet was actually great on the ship. I made all of the posts that I made while I was on the ship. I posted on my Facebook and my LinkedIn pages, and usually, I mean, on other cruise lines, I've had issues with the photos loading and just the posts actually loading. They actually went very quickly and very well through the Wi-Fi on the ship, and Wi-Fi again is complimentary for everybody on the ship as our gratuities to their crew.
Yeah.
And also too, when you buy a drink at Virgin, if it's a $5 drink, $7 drink, $8 drink, it includes the 15% gratuity already in it, or the gratuity is included. So it's not like $8 plus 15. You know how you have to sign for that stuff, right? Which you don't sign because you wear a band and everything's touchless. It's another different thing about. And it's also during cruising during COVID is a lot of that was the other touchless element, right? Like you use on the Virgin, you use a little band. So so it's the Wi-Fi is great on the ship, and the app hopefully will be improved shortly.
I'm sure it will. I can't, because to me, Virgin, as much as they are, you know, travel brands and things like that, to me, Virgin is a technology brand. So I anticipate that will be coming very, very soon.
Yeah.
Well, Ming, this has been delightful. Thank you so very much. Again, where can everybody find you online if they're looking for you?
Well, I'm really glad you asked me to be on here, and thank you again for giving me this opportunity. I have a website called yourcruisecoach.com. You can look me up there. I've got some tips and experiences that I have posted from my experiences cruises, and I'm also on Facebook. You can look up under Ming Tappin, Tappin, or you can also look up Your Cruise Coach, which is my page on there. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Look up Ming Tappin, and Instagram is your.cruise.coach, but not a dot at the end because apparently I couldn't use 3 dots. Anyways, and you can reach out to me from any of those channels, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about Virgin or Silversea or any other cruise lines. I've been on over 22 brands, and I know a little bit about cruising, so I can help out. Anyone wants to reach out and have any questions about anything, I'm happy to help.
That's fantastic. And of course, I'm going to link all that up in the show notes for you guys. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me at Art of Selling Travel on Instagram, or connect with me on LinkedIn as well. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, I'm on there, Glenda Beagle. Make sure we connect up. I'd love to keep the conversation going. And until next time.